Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to work on a reel that a viewer sent in to us. This is the Okuma Induron. It's a bait casting reel. Looks very much like a Pen 965 or some of the other reels that are out there in the marketplace. Pretty straightforward reel. I'm going to show you how to take it apart and service it. And in this case, this clicker isn't working, so we'll take the back side off. We'll try and understand why the clicker does not work there. Okay, so we're going to get started by taking the handle side off, and as we do that, you'll notice a couple of things. I do wear a protective glove on my non-working hand. I do that in order to keep the grit and grime and lubricants off of it. You'll also notice that I use a parch tray. It'll be off camera for the most part, but I do use a parch tray to make sure that anything that's taken off the reel goes in there, so that when I go to reassemble the reel, it comes back on. Alright, so the first thing is get this handle off, and you'll notice there's a button on there, but there's no easy way to do that. You don't pry it. There are two little tabs underneath it, and you simply push in on the tab, and you'll see that it'll pop up, and then you can remove that tab. Underneath that is a 10 millimeter, and now it's in a recessed hole, so I typically will use a little ratchet. And this one is going to come off normally. There you go. And in a normal sense, I mean counterclockwise. I'm just going to use that to take it off the rest of the way. And as we do this, most of you are aware, I do encourage you to take pictures along the way, just so you know how these things are set up. So we have the nut came off, and then the washer came off. Then the handle comes off. And then underneath the handle we have two things. We have a cap, and we have a click mechanism. That click mechanism is going to ride inside that hole there, so be aware of that as you go to install. There's a spring. What I like to do when I get assemblies like this, I like to just pack them the way they came off. The narrow part of the spring was below. And again, it's a good reason why to take pictures in case you have a question about which way that assembly went. And then we're going to remove the star adjuster. And then underneath the star adjuster, like many of the baitcaster reels, there's going to be a series of concave washers. Let's see if we can get them out this way. If not, they'll come out the other way when you take the piece off. But these are not flat washers. They do have a curve to them. And you'll see it almost looks like a bubble. It's kind of hard to see on this, but almost looks like a bubble. And that's going to determine your sensitivity in terms of your star drag adjuster. So there's usually about 4 of them in there. We'll keep count as we take them off. Here's 2 more, 3. Should be 1 more in there. Well, again, there's 1 more. It'll come. Here we go. Now, resist the temptation to whack that thing against a board or a bench to get it out. Simply pulling off the case will do that. Okay, we're going to take the 2 screws off from here now. They have thumb screws, but you need to break that screw hold. Then you can back the rest out by your hand. Take those 2 and put those in there as well. One, they usually stick in the case, but in this case looks like they come out completely. Take those out, and now we should be able to remove the case. And the case is going to have 2 screws that's going to enable us to service them. And you'll notice as well that there's some rubber rings that would normally hold that screw in place, those case screws, and they've come out. So if you find pieces and parts in your reel that you're unsure of, you can go get a schematic. I didn't go for the schematic on this one, but I did want to make sure that I put them in place since I saw those 2 rubber rings. Okay, we have the free spool release, spool and a bearing. And in the back here, you'll notice that that click mechanism isn't moving. It's this little angular piece here, which means that there's probably a spring that's detached in there. So we'll go over to that side, and we'll try and fix that one as well. Okay, let's just let's go right through that. It should just be the one screw. There's one screw in the center here that's a Phillips head screw. I'm thinking that's the only thing holding the side case on at the moment. Again, I don't have the blueprint for this one, the schematic, but I'm thinking that's the only thing holding it on. It would typically be the case. There you go. That came off nicely. And now we can get into the back of this reel and try and understand what's going on. So we're missing a spring here. Actually, we're missing two springs here. I'm going to have to try and figure out what we can do to substitute those springs, because there's a spring on both sides that should be here and isn't here. First question usually comes up is, where is it? I don't see it laying around in the case at all. So that may be problematic, but we'll see. I'm thinking that those springs may be similar to the springs on the pen reel, and we'll see if we can't go order some of those as well. Okay, we'll set that aside. I'll have to come back to that. Just checking in the back here to see if that springs happen to be in there. I don't see that. All right, so two screws then. We'll take off the main part of this reel. And then that'll give us access to the bottom of the case, and that bottom of the case will be where we can service the main gears and the drags, as well as do a cleanup on this. Should be able to turn it over once those screws come out and find the case itself, which is what we have here. And again, this is fairly common of a bait casting reel. One of the things we can see, very dry, so it does need the service. So we'll take the two springs off the post there, just because they always seem to get lost. We can pull the yoke off of that, get that out of the way, and then pull the main gear. Now, one of the things that's interesting to note in this reel, I always kind of look at quality if I'm comparing like an Abu or something, and I notice this one is almost all plastic. So we have a plastic release here. This is the free spool release. That's all plastic. We have a plastic yoke, and in those cases, those things tend to break. So you look a lot at why reels fail, and sometimes it's the quality of the component inside of it, and in this case we've got plastic pieces and parts. So let's just do some quick. It's clean, it just needs some lubrication. So I'm going to go to my reel grease. In this case it's a Pen Precision reel grease. I'm just going to lay a little bit where those pieces move. It's clean, there's nothing that needs to be cleaned up on this, just needs to be relubed. We'll paint that up. I'm going to flip that down just to make sure we've got the travel as much as we can with the lube, and then I'm going to put a little bit of oil, and it's a real oil, behind it just to make sure it's operating smoothly. You want to make sure that there's no catches or that to this reel. Okay, so now we've got the drag stack. The drag is a very common stack. It starts with the click lever, and this lever is actually going to be what the trip lever engages with. So watch this. We'll push this down. You'll see it fits between the teeth. Of course, there'd be pressure on that. And then when you turn your reel, that's what resets your lever. So that goes on, and it's oblong, it's not square or the like. You need to make sure it's seated properly on that portion. Next up is a hard washer. That gives you the space between the main drag. We'll just clean this off a little bit, main gear rather, not the drag. And we can reinstall. You don't need to lube this. You can actually just put it right back on the shaft. Well, it's a little light, so let's go ahead and put that on the other side of the main gear. And I'm going to pull the drag washers out of here and just make sure they're clean. These are a hard washer. I fear I probably did that wrong anyway. I'm going to take the spool gear out of the yoke, clean that off. And as we can see, it's totally dry on the gearing, so let's go ahead and put some grease onto the teeth of the gear, checking the teeth as we go along here. You also want to get a little bit of grease into that sleeve where that's going to be riding. Then we'll put that back on. The reason I pulled that one out and then turned it around, sometimes you can't get the main drag, the main gear in there without installing that spool gear first. Sometimes you're lucky you can, sometimes it doesn't work that way. So I make a habit of putting it back. And again, if you have any questions about which way it came out, just go back to your pictures you took and check those out. So these are hard fabric washers. It's almost like a plastic washer. You don't need to lube them. They're not going to absorb anything. Just need to make sure that they're clean. Sometimes if you're out there in the surf with these, they do chew them up. You get grit and sand in that from water intrusion. So just clean them up. You can reinstall. The next one up then is a flat washer. Then comes the eared washer, is the middle washer. Just wipe that off there. And then the main washer, cap washer. That's ready to reinstall, except that we need the 2 springs for the yoke. So what we've done here then is we've cleaned it up, not that it was very dirty, cleaned it up, we re-lubed the yoke and jack and trip assembly, and then we cleaned up the drags, which did not require any service. And now we're going to just reinstall the piece. I'm going to put a little lube on the anti-reverse bearing here. I'm just going to actually hit that with some cleaning fluid, the penetrating oil, and then we'll just oil that as well. Now we can reset this. Once you get the 2 screws in the back there, then we want to grab those 2 threaded screws. They go in one on each side. And now we're going to have to put this on hold. So what we'll do is we'll just box this up and we'll pretend that those springs are on the other side for now for your service. I'm going to put the plate back on for the moment. Looking for that little screw. I've found that putting a little bit of grease on the end of a fine screwdriver like that will hold that screw for you. And put that screw back in. We've got a bearing in the back, so we'll go ahead and oil that bearing. And reset this. Make sure all of your brakes are in on the spool, otherwise you'll jam it. I had that off. We're going to come back and get the springs for this, so in the meantime, I'm just going to use my brush and I'm going to make sure that we have grease on through the plastic idler gear. We're also going to put a little bit of the grease onto the end of the spool here, which is going to drive the idler gear. You can throw that back in. Now you want to look, you have this post here and on the back you have that insert. So bring the post up bring that insert from the jack so that you can mate them like that, and you won't have any trouble at all with your piece. But before we do that, I just noticed those rubber rings. So let's put this back in. We'll get the first of those rubber rings that we found to belong on this. Now those rings would usually hold this in. They weren't. Not an easy task to do. All right, now we got them. So now we'll go back in, put this on. Again, watch your positioning of the free spool release. Now we can tighten these up. And we kind of reverse the process now. So we're looking for the 4 tension washers. There you go. Next, I happen to put them face to face in a pair so that the concave is in the middle. Put that on. Next, you have that hole there for our click mechanism, so you want to grab your click mechanism. Put that stud into that. Next up then would be your spring, and that went upside down if you were paying attention earlier. Then we have our cap. Kind of a spring cap. You're going to be pushing down on that. Then you have a washer, and you have your, oops, you don't have your washer, you have your handle. Let's go back and take that cap off. This is why pictures are good, even if you know what you're doing, sometimes you get a little bit confused here. Now we'll grab this. Now we can put the cap washer on. The nut. And again, this came off the conventional style. The righty-tighty is the way to go back on. You have to keep pressure on the handle while you're doing this. There we go. Then grab your socket. Tighten that down, give it a spin. Make sure that your free spool is working. Use the spool adjuster to make sure you get nice movement there. Make sure that your drags are working. Tighten them up. Those are holding beautifully. And all we have to do now is get those springs on the other side, but I didn't want to hold this video up waiting for someone to wonder what's going on there. Okay, on the cap, there's 2 sides to this. There's a cap side that has the single prong, and then there's another one that has a prong and a little metal. You'll notice that the handle here has 2 steps to it. You want to make sure that the wider one with the 2 clicks goes in a wider hole. Just snap that on. And now you've got a reel that's ready to go fishing, with the exception of this anti-reverse here. And like I said, we'll try and go find some parts for this. And if we can't get them from Okuma, I think the pen ones on pen 65 will work. But regardless, we should be able to restore that click function as well. It's not needed for the reel. This reel can go fishing tomorrow. However, the viewer who sent this in would like to see that restored, so we're going to go ahead and do that. One more thing I neglected here as we were doing this. You want to remove that pawl cap, and you want to put a little bit of oil around the pawl to keep that flowing. And again, use a fishing reel oil. In this case, it's Reel X. Designed for fishing reels. It's a synthetic oil. And you can put that cap back on. Be careful with these caps. You want to make sure that they're installed properly. In this case, it's cross threading. You don't want that. These caps break Shimano caps are notorious for that. So get it right, there you go. Get it right so that you don't have any problems in the future, or you don't snap it and have to wait for the part there. Okay, and then generally a little bit of oil onto the worm gear, and a little bit of oil just on that one peg that it's going to ride on. And there you go. We're ready to go fishing with that reel, with the exception of the clicker. And again, we'll see what we can do on that clicker to get a couple of springs to make that work. All right, so I hope you've enjoyed that demonstration. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. If you like it, please like it and subscribe. I'm always interested in boosting my subscriptions and in having more people view these videos. So with that, there you go, the Okuma Induron. Nice fishing reel, nice bait casting reel, ready to go fishing again. Thank you for viewing.